The murder of a 16-year-old girl named Leanne Tiernan in the city of Leeds, England, was a high-profile murder case. This girl had been abducted less than 1 mile from her home after returning from a Christmas shopping trip with a friend. The missing person inquiry which followed was one of the largest in the history of West Yorkshire Police, and one people of Leeds will never forget. This is the case of Leanne Tiernan. On the 26th of November in the year 2000, a pupil from West Leeds High School had vanished. Her name, Leanne Tiernan. At 7 p.m, her mother had rung the police and reported her daughter missing. She was absolutely frantic, and the police immediately began a missing person inquiry headed by Detective Superintendent Chris Gregg. They arrived at Leanne's house and spoke to her mother to gather as much information as possible. Leanne had been born on the 27th of September 1984, and at the time of this case she was 16 years of age. She'd been a pupil at West Leeds High School, and that evening on the 26th of November in the year 2000, she had last been seen alive at 4:50 p.m, when she and her 15-year-old friend, Sarah Whitehouse, had returned to Bramley by bus after a shopping trip in Leeds city centre. The girls had had a little bit of cash each, and they had got the bus from their home and gone into Leeds, into the city of West Yorkshire, looking for small gifts and Christmas cards for friends and family. And on arrival back via bus, the pair had parted ways at Huffley Lane, and her friend Sarah watched Leanne setting off along an unlit path through an area of wooded wasteland known as Huffley Gill. It was a shortcut home, and despite being dark and muddy, Leanne had frequented this area many times before, usually by day, but it was close to her home and she felt safe in and around the area that she lived in. And when Sarah arrived home, she telephoned Leanne. It was their thing to check in on each other, but when Leanne's mother answered and explained that Leanne wasn't home yet, Sarah was surprised to find that she wasn't there. Leanne should have been home first. Leanne's mother was now constantly looking out of the window and expecting the door to go at any minute, but Leanne did not return home. And after speaking with Sarah and knowing Leanne should have been home a while ago, Leanne's mother decided to call her personal mobile phone to find out where she was. Sarah was home, Leanne should be home too. As she called Leanne's phone, the phone rang out for some time and then cut off. And then she rang it again, and it was cut off after 4 rings. Her mother called the police, and straight away a missing persons case was set up, and a search of the local area where Leanne was last seen was undertaken, although no traces of her were found. And as the inquiry progressed, it became one of the largest ever undertaken by West Yorkshire Police, involving up to 200 officers and hundreds of volunteers. More than 1,400 house-to-house inquiries were conducted, and 800 houses along her probable cause route, designated by her police as the Red Route, were searched, along with 800 sheds, garages, outbuildings, and 150 commercial premises within a half-mile radius of Huffley Gill. DNA samples were also taken from 140 men interviewed by police in connection with their inquiry, and 12 search warrants were executed at various addresses in Leeds. The West Yorkshire Police Underwater Search Unit carried out a search of a 3-mile section of the Leeds to Liverpool Canal, but nothing was found, and 2 miles of which of this was drained to a depth of 1 metre. The unit also searched 32 drain shafts in the area, and Yorkshire Water were called in to help locate disused and abandoned drains and wells. Collections of household waste were halted temporarily to allow police to search all the bins in the area for evidence. On the 3rd of December in the year 2000, police staged a reconstruction of Leanne's last moments, reenacted by her friend Sarah Whitehouse and Leanne Tiernan's older sister Michelle, in the hope of jogging the memories of potential witnesses about Leanne's movements. Detectives also sent text messages to Leanne Tiernan's mobile phone, which was now switched off, but had briefly been activated on the 27th of November. A local businessman offered $10,000 reward for information leading to her safe return, and the supermarket chain Iceland printed her picture and details on milk cartons sold at the stores nationwide. Police made a public appeal for anyone who might have information, anyone who might have been in the Lindley Woods area walking their dogs, anyone that might have information about others who had recently visited the area to come forward and contact the police. There were unconfirmed reports of sightings as far away as Doncaster and Blackpool, but after 9 months, there had been no possible sightings. A 19-year-old Leanne Tiernan's boyfriend, a care assistant called Wayne Keeley, pleaded for her to get in touch. On the 4th of December, police released an e-fit facial composite of a man who had been seen walking a dog in the Huffley Gill area shortly before Leanne disappeared. He was described as about 5 foot 8 inches tall, kind of stocky build, with a round reddish face, wearing a black woolen hat, a 3/4 length waterproof jacket and dirty jeans. But then, Mr. Mark Bisson had been out walking his 2 dogs in Lindley Woods, North Yorkshire. It was his usual route that he took every day, in dense woodland just around 50 yards from a busy car park in Lindley Woods near Otley, on the border of North Yorkshire and West Yorkshire. Mark had noticed something out of the corner of his eye that was not normally there. He looked into it further. Was it people dumping their rubbish again, he thought, as he walked over to the item, and at first it looked like some large green plastic rubbish bags, but as he investigated further and his dogs were sniffing, he realised it was a body. He stepped away, shocked at what he had found. Mark quickly called the police, who arrived on scene and cordoned off the area. The body had been wrapped inside 9 green plastic bin bags, secured with twine, with a black bin bag secured around the head with a leather dog collar, then placed inside a floral patterned duvet cover. Plastic cable ties had been used as a ligature to strangle the body, and more ties had been used to bind the hands. It was a female, and she only looked young. A dark coloured scarf had also been wrapped around her neck. Her hair was still tied in a ponytail with a band and hair clips. The body was taken to the local mortuary for further examination. The state of decomposition of the body led some forensic experts to believe that after her death she had been locked up and kept in some kind of storage freezer for weeks before the body was found. In part to avoid detection and in part as a trophy maybe. A cryobiology expert was called in to examine the microstructure of the body's cardiac tissue and concluded that the body could have been frozen for some time. But someone somewhere had been missing a young teen, and police felt they already knew who the young girl was. Following their appeal for information, Mr. Taylor's name was given to police by 2 former girlfriends who they'd met him through a Lonely Hearts column in a newspaper, both saying that he had driven past the woods in their company and boasted of poaching there on a regular basis. So John Taylor, he was born in August 56 and lived in Leeds. He was a parcel delivery worker for Parcel Force and lived on the same housing estate as Leanne Tiernan, within a mile of where she was last seen alive. He was locally known as the Pet Man, as he kept a number of dogs and ferrets and sold pet food to neighbours. He was also known to be a poacher. His only previous conviction was for theft of a suit when he was 15 years old and was considered by his neighbours to be trustworthy and ordinary. And as police began to conduct thorough inquiries into John Taylor's background, they discovered that he was a frequent user of this Lonely Hearts advertisements. And through his telephone records, they identified the women he had contacted in this way and began to interview them. One woman had dated John Taylor, disclosed that John Taylor told her he liked tying women up and locking them in cupboards. Another said that John Taylor had told her that he had a fetish with bondage whips and ties, and said that he wanted to tie up her daughter with cable ties. A former girlfriend who had briefly lived with John Taylor told police that she had often visited Lindley Woods with him while they were dating, and that she had eventually broke off their relationship with him because of his bondage fetish and feeling that she was being RAPED'd. When asked by police to describe how John Taylor would tie her, she described his practice of securing a plastic cable tie around each of her wrists, then tying her hands behind her back by using a third cable tie to link them together. This was exactly how Leanne Tiernan had been found. She also said that Mr. Taylor kept a bundle of cable ties in a drawer next to his bed. 2 other women also said that John Taylor enjoyed this bondage during sex and had bound their breasts and hands with cable ties. The leather dog collar found around Leanne's neck was manufactured by a company based in Nottingham, who had sold it to 220 retailers. Detective Constable David Wilson began contacting each of them to ask if they had records of sales to anyone in the Leeds area. The 112th company contacted was a Liverpool-based mail-order company called Pets Pyjamas. They confirmed that they had made 3 sales in the area and emailed a list to the detective constable. Mr. John Taylor's name was one of the customers, and this was immediately flagged up for attention as a name previously provided following the appeal. Scientists at the Forensic Science Service examined the scarf which had been tied around Leanne's neck and found a hair caught in the knot, which did not belong to Leanne. The FSS were unable to extract a DNA profile from the hair's root using the conventional DNA tests, so they carried out mitochondrial DNA testing within the shaft of the hair, and this provided a DNA profile which matched John Taylor's. FSS examination of the twine showed that it was of a unique type, only manufactured by a company in Devon. They usually only supplied products to the Ministry of Defence, but a small one-off batch had been sold to the public for use as rabbit catch nets. This batch was an exact match for the twine used on Leanne's body and also subsequently found at John Taylor's home. The yellow cable ties found on Leanne's body were identified as being manufactured by an Italian company who sold 99% of them to the Royal Mail, of which John Taylor's employee was Parcelforce, a subsidiary. The same cable ties were found in John Taylor's home when it was searched by police. Pieces of green plastic, identical to that which had been used to wrap the body, were found in John Taylor's home. Traces of red nylon carpet fibres were found on Leanne's clothing, which the FSS described as very distinctive due to the unusual way in which the fibre had been dyed. When police searched John Taylor's home, they discovered that he had recently removed all of the carpets from the house and burned them, but small traces of fibres matching those on the body were found caught on nails on the floorboards. The FSS employed an expert in forensic pollen analysis who was able to demonstrate that Leanne Tiernan had been in John Taylor's garden just before she was killed, based on the distinctive types of pollen found in her nasal cavity, on her skin and in her hair. John Taylor, who had lived alone after his wife had divorced him in 1996, was arrested on suspicion of murder on the 16th of October 2001, a year after Leanne had disappeared. Police immediately sealed off his house and gardens and a patch of wasteland to the rear of his property. The gardens were then excavated and the property, including 3 large chest freezers, was subjected to a rigorous examination over a period of 10 days. And when interviewed by police, John Taylor said that he had picked Leanne Tiernan up by the scarf around her neck, at which point she had died, and claimed that her death was an accident. He said he had panicked and hidden her body in Lindley Woods. The police and prosecution maintained he had cable-tied her hands behind her back in the bedroom in preparation for the RAPE, and then used a cable tie as a ligature to murder her, and her blindfold slipped and she saw his face. And when asked why he had abducted Leanne Tiernan, he replied, "I have no idea." When police challenged this version of taking the body to Lindley Woods soon after the murder, he claimed that he had first kept the body hidden underneath pallets in his back garden and then stored it inside his sofa. On the 15th of February 2002, John Taylor appeared before Leeds Crown Court and entered a plea of guilty with respect to the abduction of Leanne Tiernan. He was not asked to enter a plea on the murder charge at that point, and pending a separate Newton hearing, was remanded in custody awaiting trial. And on the 8th of July 2002, the first day of the trial, he entered a plea of guilty with respect to the murder of Leanne Tiernan. He was sentenced the same day, and Mr. Justice Astill said, "After the death of this girl at your hands, you wanted sexual deviancy with a girl of a similar age. That not only demonstrates how dangerous you are, but demonstrates your lack of remorse. Not by chance were you in this area for this purpose. You were not acting on impulse. You chose a secluded place and a vulnerable young girl who suited your purposes. This was as cold and calculating as it can be. You are a dangerous sexual sadist. Your purpose in kidnapping this young girl was so that you could satisfy your perverted cravings. The suffering you caused her and the suffering you continue to cause those who loved her simply cannot be measured. You must expect to spend the rest of your natural life in custody." John Taylor was sentenced to the mandatory life sentence of life imprisonment. However, his sentence was later set at a minimum of 20 years. As the police now had John Taylor's DNA profile, they were able to review other unsolved cases, other unsolved SEX attacks in the local area, where forensic evidence was still available for DNA extraction. 2 attacks in particular stood out, as they'd both been committed on the estate where John Taylor lived. The first took place in 1988, when a 32-year-old woman was attacked as she walked across the Huffley Gill to collect her children from school. John Taylor, who was wearing a mask and armed with a weapon, forced her to carry out oral sex and then RAPED'd her. The second attack took place in 1989, when John Taylor, again masked and wielding a weapon, broke into the home of a 21-year-old woman in the middle of the day. He forced her into the bedroom, where he undressed her, blindfolded her, gagged her, forced her to commit oral sex before raping her. Her small child was present in the house at the time. John Taylor was formally rearrested in October 2002 and was charged with both of these attacks. And although John Taylor initially refused to cooperate with the police, the DNA evidence was so overwhelming, and he eventually pleaded guilty to both of these attacks. On the 4th of February 2003, he was given 2 terms of life imprisonment. Superintendent Gregg said, "We are still concerned that there may be other victims and families who have been affected by Mr. Taylor's actions," and revealed that a diamante necklace found in his car at the time of the arrest may have belonged to another victim, as they were still unable to find out where it had come from or who it belonged to. John Taylor is known to have travelled across the country, meeting women he had contacted through personal ads, and also his parcel force work. And with the solving of 2 of these cases, police discounted his insistence that Leanne was an isolated case, and that he had taken his dog for a walk and just snapped. They maintained that John was a serial SEX attacker for 20 years leading up to his arrest. John had denied involvement in any other crimes. However, on the 26th of October 2018, he was sentenced to a whole life for a series of other attacks, other assaults on women, meaning he is now unlikely to ever see daylight.